Okay, so I want to welcome everyone again here to this sort of Druid Christian service today. It's the 22nd of September. We're celebrating Equinox in the year 2013. And I want to talk a bit about what that symbolises philosophically. It's a time of balance, a time of the balance of light and dark. From this day forth, the nights are going to start getting longer than the days, but at this magical moment, the day and the night are of equal strength. And our ancestors, a very long time ago, worked this out, the sacred calendar of the years. They built stone circles all over the British Isles and Ireland, marking these important calendar times, the two equinoxes and the two solstices, of maximum light and minimum light. And it was very important to them. Now, I believe this was not just, as some people speculate, to do with the farming year and so on. This was being done long, long before our ancestors were farmers. They were hunter-gatherers and they were shamans. And in their Druid consciousness, which is the term they would have used to describe their sages and seers, they saw this as a metaphysical point. The balance of light and dark has significance from a metaphysical point of view. Now, all cosmologies that we know of any sophistication, emphasize balance at the core. In the Chinese Taoist system, the yin-yang are poised in perfect harmony. They create the great diagram of the interlocking yin and yang, each containing the seeds of the opposite. In the Kabbalah, the tree of life has a left and a right pillar, and a central pillar. Again, it's about balance. In ancient Greek cosmology, the four elements are regarded as metaphysical, fundamentally. And the job of the philosopher was to find the balance in any given situation. And as Aristotle said, that was the path of virtue, the mean. So a situation goes awry, a community or institution collapses, because it loses its ethical balance point, its place of virtue. And the philosopher's job is to point to that. Just like in a human being, people that work with spiritual healing and physical healing of the body, we get ill because we lose balance. Hippocrates and the birth of Greek medicine pointed that. We need moderation in diet, in habits and so on. So this question of balance is very important. And the Druids had a similar comprehension of this, the balance between this world and the next, and the balance of forces between men and women. Were symbolized by the spiral for the Druid, which is the energy that goes forward. When you reach balance, it becomes a transcendental force. It doesn't just stop at stasis, like stuckness. It's the balance of the inner spiral within that sort of consciousness energy. And if you think about it, the worlds of the brain are shaped like a spiral. Your fingertips are shaped like a spiral. Your hair is shaped like a spiral, and the galaxies are shaped like a spiral. The Druids talked about, the wheel of Rhiannon and, the goddess, the silver wheel, Arianrod, was the goddess of the Celts who oversees the entire universe. And we're her children. In the Irish, the Tuatha De Danann, the children of Dana, the great goddess, which was the same root as the word Danube. I've just been on the Danube River. And that was the mother goddess, the water. So, and the water, the symbolises by the Tau, for the Druids was sacred because it reaches the middle point of any geographical location. It flows to the centre and holds the energy and then flows to the sea. So, all these, I think, point to a holistic vision of harmony. Now, what seems to have happened in the world is we've come astray from that. And rather, we've ended up with a kind of apocalyptic vision of a battle between good and evil, or light and dark, in which the balance of the world is being threatened because everybody thinks they're on the good side and they're attacking the other people who are the bad people. Those people are with Satan, we're with God. And I want to just use the equinox to address that cosmological imbalance. You see, for the Druid consciousness and for philosophical consciousness, there is no evil, there is simply ignorance. There is no devil in a concrete form of the force of evil that's trying to destroy humanity. Therefore, there is no enemy we have to destroy apart from our own ignorance. Right? Plato was very clear about this. It's lack of knowledge, lack of Sophia, wisdom, that causes evil. And evil is simply imbalance. Too much of stuff, And what we have to do as a planet, philosophically speaking, and I've just returned from the World Congress of Philosophers in Athens, where my views on this were reinforced by conversations I had with philosophers from all over the world, is we have to back down from that apocalyptic, polarized cosmology of light versus dark, or good versus evil. Because the world is dying from this very simplistic logic of either or. You're either a Muslim or you're a Jew. You're either a Christian or you're a pagan. You're either an atheist or you're a theist, And we're being sold this dumbed-down cosmology of either or, which is just leading to infinite numbers of battle lines. In Syria, you're either an Alawite or a Sunni, or you're a Shia, or you're a Christian, and they're all fighting in the streets, literally. What I want to say to my dear brothers and sisters in Syria is you've got to wake up from that outmoded cosmology you've been sold. There is an alternative. There's a holistic cosmology in which light and dark don't stand for good and evil. They stand for good and good. The light is good, but so is the dark. We love winter. We're coming into winter. We love the snow. We love the darkness. It's a time for being around the fire at home, celebrating the inner space. The yin, the dark force in Chinese cosmology, is good. We all love the yin. It's the feminine. It's the secret, the mystery of the valley. But we love the light, the summer, the sun, the yang force. So there's no evil anywhere here. The equinox is the point of balance between good and good. They're just different forms of good. So the Alawites, the Sunnis, the Shias, the Christians, the Jews, they're all different forms of the good from a philosophical perspective. And that's a cosmological shift of consciousness we need to get across on this planet. And once we have that, we will awaken from these wars, because we'll realize we are the other. We are implicit and connected. And the other's beauty is a reflection of God's infinite mercies and grace that are transcend any one particular form. So this is some philosophical observations here about equinox. And I want to say also, in the Christian tradition, that's symbolized by the cross, which really, in its esoteric form, is the 4 points of the wheel of time. Now, Christ symbolized that balanced consciousness when you transcend the opposites and polarities. This is why Christ was comfortable talking to pagan, Romans, Greeks, prostitutes, top people in the Sanhedrin, chief rabbis, this or that. Because he'd gone to a place of that perfect balanced consciousness. And his death, then, what's symbolized by that is what we humans do to balance. The tragedy of that, the reason, it was a sort of cosmic moment for mankind, a wake-up call, is because, when you do attain that consciousness of balance, it has political, social, economic, implications. If we all reach that enlightenment point, that midpoint of balance, and there's no evil to fight, the first implication is peace. So, of course, Christ taught, non-violence. That's the first thing that comes from it, just as it did for Buddha or Mahavira. When you reach that point of balance and synthesis, peace is the first logical thing. But then comes justice, because, if you've got 10 of something and that guy's only got half of something, and that's your brother and you're at one, then you'll share whatever they need. So anyway, the good news is that this cosmological shift I've been talking about is there, already out there. And one of my great discoveries when I was in Athens was I did some reading of Hegel, who was a Christian mystic. Not many people know about Hegel's depths as a thinker and philosopher. One of the most learned philosophers in the 19th century. And he was professor at Berlin University. Now, in Britain, people don't read Hegel very much. Most people who have sort of an interest in intellectual things, believed that Marx outmoded Hegel and made clear where Hegel was wrong. I take a different view. I think that if we go back and reread Hegel, we discover an incredible depth and richness of spiritual wisdom. And when Marx tried to reduce Hegel's insights to materialism, I think he made a fatal error, which the world has paid dearly for, in the kind of dogmatic, outmoded, Stalinist, Bolshevik kind of materialism, which again is an either-or thing. Either you're with us, the Bolsheviks, or we'll shoot you. You know, it's a kind of absolutist thing. Now let's go back to Hegel just for a second, and I want to share a reading here. In his lectures on aesthetics, which are, I don't think hardly anyone ever reads these, they are his most amazing work. He wrote these 2 huge volumes on the history of art. Now Hegel didn't just talk about, any old history of art. He did the entire history of human art. Right? So he talks about Egyptian art, classical art, Babylonian art, the whole evolution of art, Greek classical art, right down through the Middle Ages, down to Romantic art. He's writing in the 19th century. And he's talking about the philosophical meaning of art. What is beauty? What is inspiration? Where does art come from? And when he gets to Romantic art, he talks about the nature of love. Now, no philosophy professor's ever told me Hegel wrote extensively on the nature of love, which is the secret for this thing I'm talking about. And I found this amazing passage I want to share, which is profound in its implications and relates to what I'm talking about in this brief talk. He says the following: the reality of the absolute as infinite subjectivity is the spirit itself. God is present only in knowledge, in this element of the internal. This absolute existence of God, as no less ideal than subjective universality, does not, therefore, limit itself to this individual, Christ, who in his history has brought to light the reconciliation of human with divine subjectivity, but extends itself to the human consciousness reconciled with God. In general, to humanity, which exists as many individuals. Now, buried in that somewhat arcane philosophical jargon is a bombshell, right, theologically. What Hegel's saying is a traditional Christian theology teaches that Christ incarnated the absolute, God. Christ is the God-man. And Hegel's saying, yes, but that's a philosophical, we can understand what's going on there philosophically. He touched or tapped into that universal subjectivity which is God. And in doing that, he then brought those energies into our earth plane. And the work was the reconciliation of God and man, the peace treaty between God and man. But what he goes on to say is that, but that has to be accomplished inside each of us. That universal consciousness is inside all of us. It's our birthright as human beings. And so Christ was just showing symbolically, enacting what we all have to do. So you can see in that the germs of, if you want... Oh dear. Are you right?
Yeah, just trying to sleep.
You can see the germs of universal consciousness. But it has to be done internally for each of us. And this goes back to the point I was making right at the beginning of this talk about the meaning of the equinox being a place of balance. When we find that, now the question is, when we find that, what do we do with it? How do we apply that to given conflicts? And I just want to end by reminding us that the conflict in Syria is still raging, and in Egypt, where some of us have visited, and in many other parts of the world. In Iraq, there's been car bombs this last week. I'm in touch with an Anglican vicar who runs one of the churches in Baghdad. You know, he's just, the level of violence there is still shocking. And it's Sunnis versus Shias. And it comes from that oppositional logic, either or. Either you're a Sunni or a Shia. I've met Muslims at a very senior level, academically. I've taught at Muslim college. At that level, to Muslim philosophers, you know, you look on Shiism and Sunnism as both wisdom paths that have much to offer, but none is absolutely right. If we have humility, you know, if you met Muhammad, if he came to one of these services and we asked him, are you a Shia Muslim or a Sunni Muslim, he'd laugh. Or are you a Sufi Muslim? You know, he'd laugh at you. He'd say I'm a Druid. Because, you know, I want to be from somewhere much older. So how do we apply that universal consciousness I've been talking about, the balanced state, the wisdom of the equinox, to these conflicts? I think it has to be done through mediation, philosophically. This is why I run a mediation service. I think mediation is the only way to get across politically that both people are partly right, but nobody's right absolutely. And this is why I'm in touch with the Foreign Office and the European Union to try and get them seriously to take on board that we should use our diplomatic expertise, we should use the wisdom of our governments and diplomatic apparatus to be in these countries helping mediate these situations. The German government, the Irish government, the British, you know, we've all lived through wars. We know the cost of these things. We had a civil war in Britain 400 years ago that was horrendous. We don't want our neighbours, if we reach out in love, we should be trying to bring them to mediation. And that's the philosophical response. The same with Israel and Palestine and, you know, all the other Middle Eastern zones of conflict. Now, what is mediation philosophically? It's restoring the fragments of the whole back to a recognition of their mutual universality. Yeah. And that's kind of the work that we're trying to do here in this castle at the Institute of Peace Studies and Philosophy, is to try and see each wisdom path as a fragment of the greater whole. And, you know, when we can do that, we get the perfect balance, if you want, the global equinox that we need. And peace then, you know, becomes just taken for granted. You know, we can get on with much more interesting stuff, like logging the writings of all the sages and saints of mankind, for instance, just for starters, or collating all the great poets of the world, you know, and all their writings, because they've all spoken about what I'm talking about. Anyway, I'm going to stop there, and I just want to say that I hope this equinox brings that energy, not just to us in our own lives, but to the planet as a whole. And may we all be blessed by that divine love. Amen.